Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Govberg, and thanks for logging on. Today we're looking at the Rolex Oyster Perpetual Sea Dweller reference 16660. This is the famed 666. You can see it and you can buy it on our website, govbergwatches.com. And if you enjoy these videos, please subscribe to our channel. You can also get the latest luxury watch news, views, reviews, and multimedia by downloading our app, Govberg On Time. Now on my wrist, 6 1/3 inches, 16 centimeters in circumference, you can see evil by means of evil at sea thanks to this 666 Sea Dweller. Now it has the stance of a classical vintage Rolex. 40 millimeters across the round of the case, not including the guards and crown. It is relatively thick considering the outstanding, for the late 70s, depth rating of 4,000 feet. And you can see that because of that 15 millimeter thickness and a somewhat outcropped cantilevered bezel, this is not going to be the best pairing for a very tight dress cuff or sleeve. Use the Submariner for that. This one's for actually getting wet and wild with a watch that you can truthfully call a vintage timepiece. And it's beautifully bolstered for that kind of use. Now, from lug to lug, it sort of splits the difference between a modern Rolex and a vintage one. 48 millimeters from lug to lug. This example here is on a roughly mid-90s V-Series reference 93150 bracelet that would not be original to the timepiece, but does bring solid end links. So you measure from one horn to the outcropping rigid horn on the other side, and now you get a somewhat more modern 50 millimeter lug-to-lug span. Now the bracelet is in good condition. It does have some stretch to it, but it has a secure clamshell that's still very crisp. There's a little bit of polishing of the crown on the clasp itself, but it maintains good definition, and on the inside, it's in outstanding condition. It maintains its Rolex flip-lock dive extension for convenient use over a wetsuit, or, if you're me, simply over a sweater in cold weather. Now the bottom line is that closes with a snick and a snap, and everything remains quite crisp. So inboard of those solid end links, you can see a watch that is a beautifully preserved everyday wearer. Now the heart and soul of this, because it is an 8.9 million serial number, so roughly 1986, is the gloss white gold applied index dial. Now those who follow vintage Rolex know that there was a transition within the transitional references in the mid-80s when Rolex generally went from matte dials with printed loomed indices. All of them are in tritium, gloss or matte, but they went from the matte with printed indices to gloss, a sort of gloss lacquer with applied white gold hour markers that had the tritium on top of them rather than simply printed to the dial. Now within the gloss dials, which started in roughly 1985 for the 666, you have two different generations. The latter one, the Mark II, being what you see here. Now you can notice that there's a taller, somewhat more narrow Rolex coronet crown at 12 o'clock, and if you look at the script Sea Dweller, you can see there is a little hyphen between Sea and Dweller, and that declares the second generation gloss dial. It's in outstanding condition, and it is the heart and soul, it is the value proposition of this watch. It is, from a vintage collector's perspective, with Rolex, it is where all of the value of this watch is contained, and it's wonderfully original in that respect. Now the hands are later service items that have been replaced with Luminova, so while the tritium no longer glows, the fact that it does have replacement hands with Luminova mean that you'll always be able to see where the hour, minute, and seconds hand are. So you can actually read this vintage watch even in the dark. Now the nice thing about the transitional 666 is that you can wear it like a modern watch. Unlike the 1665 that came before, I'll show the case back even though it is just a traditional Rolex brushed metallic screwed on component, but underneath that case back sits the Rolex caliber 3035, and it was a significant break with the reference that came before it, the 1665 with its 1570 caliber. That was a slower beat rate, 19,800. It was also a acrylic crystal watch, whereas this is a sapphire crystal. The older watch had a shallower depth rating, and while no one's going to test the outer limits of either, the bottom line is having a thicker sapphire crystal and a more heavily reinforced case and crown just means that you have a more robust watch for use on the surface. So this translates better to everyday wear and modern use, including in water, than the previous generation, first generation 1665. So this is a vintage watch that you can use in everyday activity. Now, the 3035 is free sprung. It is COSC certified as a Swiss chronometer. It does have hacking seconds, so when you pull the crown, you stop the seconds. It does have a quick set function for the date. So in every respect, right down to the 4 Hz beat rate, it is just like a modern Rolex in the way you wear it and interact with it. And that's why transitional Rolex is really the next hot thing in Rolex vintage collecting, because we're starting to move into an era of watches that are truly vintage, being 3 decades old and older in some cases, but they incorporate enough of the modern refinements that we identify with the brand, in addition to serviceability and parts access, that quite frankly makes them just more serviceable than true vintage pieces from the prior era. You can see this remarkable transitional reference. See evil, the evil at sea, the 666, and buy it on our website, govbergwatches.com.